Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're tackling AI in education using Rose Luckin's book, AI for School Teachers, to guide us. We really want to help you grasp AI's potential in education and learn to navigate all those new educational AI products.
Yeah, so the book starts with this really simple definition of AI from the Oxford English Dictionary. It says AI is the capacity of computers or other machines to exhibit or simulate intelligent behavior.
That's a pretty broad definition. Like, what are some ways AI is already a part of our everyday lives?
Well, you're right, it is a broad definition. That's because AI can look like a lot of different things. Think about like voice assistants that can answer your questions,
Right.
or like visual search tools that help you find stuff online. Those all use AI.
So we're already using it more than we realize. The book also talks about these two main types of AI, Joa FAI and machine learning.
Yeah.
What's the difference between those two?
So Joe FAI, that stands for good old-fashioned AI, and it works by following pre-programmed rules. It's kind of like a set of instructions. If this happens, then do that. This makes it easy to understand how it works,
Yeah.
but it also means it can't learn new information or
Yeah.
adapt to new situations.
So it's kind of like a very literal way to approach AI.
Right.
What about machine learning? That sounds a little more flexible.
Exactly. Machine learning systems actually learn and improve over time by analyzing data. It's like when you train a pet. With enough repetition and feedback,
Right?
the algorithm starts to recognize patterns and make predictions.
That's amazing. But that learning must require just tons of data.
You're exactly right. Machine learning algorithms are data hungry. The more data they have, the better they do.
So how does all of this apply to education?
So Luckin's book lays out this 7 steps to AI readiness framework that focuses on using AI ethically in education. It encourages educators to first think about the specific challenges they're facing
Okay.
and then explore how AI could maybe offer a solution.
Can you give us an example of that?
Sure. One challenge that keeps coming up in the book is maintaining a high quality of teaching and learning when things get disrupted. Like, think about the pandemic.
Right.
Schools had to switch to remote learning really quickly, and that created a ton of new problems. AI tools can help with some of those.
That makes a lot of sense. What other challenges does the book talk about?
Well, another example is that gender gap that we see in subjects like math. AI could help analyze all kinds of data like grades and attendance records, even student-teacher interactions, to try and figure out what's causing the gender gap.
It sounds like AI can really help us dig deeper and understand the nuances of these challenges instead of just what's happening on the surface.
Exactly. AI can help us understand why things are happening.
I was also really interested in the book's discussion of multimodal data. What exactly is that?
Multimodal data basically means collecting information from a bunch of different sources, not just tests or surveys, but also things like eye tracking, audio recordings,
Wow.
and even physiological data.
Yeah. So what's the benefit of using all those different sources of data?
Well, it paints a much clearer picture of how students learn and the situations where learning happens. Like, imagine being able to track not just whether a student got an answer right or wrong, but also how engaged they are, their emotions,
Yeah.
and how they use the learning material.
That's fascinating. The book mentions a project that used multimodal data called the Java Tutor Project.
Right.
What did they learn from that project?
So the Java Tutor Project used eye tracking data and a bunch of other info to figure out how students learn programming concepts. They found that if you give personalized feedback based on the students' eye movements, you can actually help them believe in their ability to succeed.
So it's not just about looking at the data, but using it to create more effective and more personalized learning experiences.
Exactly. The Java Tutor Project really shows how powerful AI can be in helping us do that.
Okay, so let's say we've figured out a specific problem in our own classrooms. What's next? How do we actually apply AI to solve it?
Well, that's where things get a little more technical. Imagine you're making a really complex dish.
Okay.
You start with all your raw ingredients.
Hey.
In this case, that's our data.
Right.
And you have to clean them, organize them, and prepare them before you can start actually cooking.
I like that analogy. So in the world of data, this means removing errors,
Yeah,
dealing with missing info, and making sure everything is labeled correctly.
you got it. Luckin emphasizes that this data prep work is super important and honestly, usually the most time-consuming part of the project.
That makes sense. You know what they say, garbage in, garbage out?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Once the data is all prepped and ready, then we can start using different AI techniques. One of those is called feature engineering.
Feature engineering. What's that?
So this is where we use our own expertise to decide which specific Data points or features are going to be most important to the problem we're trying to solve.
Okay.
It's like choosing the key ingredients that are going to make our dish really special.
So basically, we're trying to cut through the noise and focus on what really matters.
Right. And then we can apply something called principal component analysis, or PCA.
PCA, that sounds kind of intimidating.
It's not as scary as it sounds. It's basically a way to figure out which features are the most important ones that explain the differences in our data.
Okay.
It's kind of like being a detective at a crime scene. PCA helps you pick out the clues that are the most important.
So we're sorting through all the possibilities and zeroing in on what matters most. How does this apply to education specifically?
So Laak has this example in her book where unsupervised machine learning is used to analyze data about the quality of teaching and learning. By using PCA, they were able to find these distinct teaching styles and learning profiles that were hidden within the data.
So we're not just looking at individual data points, but
Yeah.
actually at patterns and groupings.
Exactly. And once we found those patterns, we can connect them back to other data we've collected. For example, we might see that a certain teaching style is linked to students being more engaged,
Right.
or that some learning profiles do better in certain learning environments.
So this is where AI helps us move beyond simply describing the problem to actually understanding it on a deeper level.
Exactly. And that deeper understanding is key to coming up with the better solutions.
This is also interesting. We've covered a lot from defining AI and its different types to understanding how to prepare our data and use techniques like PCA. Where do we go from here?
Well, in the next part, we'll dive deeper into some more specific ways AI can be used in education. We'll talk about things like supervised learning and even see how good old-fashioned Jugo FAI can still be used to create personalized learning experiences that really work.
This is just the beginning of our AI journey, and I can't wait to learn more in part 2. Welcome back. We're continuing our deep dive into AI in education with Rose Lucking's book, AI for School Teachers.
Last time we talked about how AI can help us find hidden patterns in our data, which could help us come up with better solutions to problems that educators face.
Right. We talked about how looking at multimodal data and techniques like PCA can help us understand the why behind what's happening.
Now let's look closer at some other AI techniques and see how those could be used in education.
I'm excited to learn more. Last time we talked a little about supervised learning. How is that different from unsupervised learning, which we talked about a lot?
So we mostly focused on unsupervised learning, which is about finding patterns in the data without being given specific instructions. It's like if you're exploring a new city without a map, you're open to discovering things,
Right.
but you might also miss some important landmarks.
So how does supervised learning approach things differently?
Well, supervised learning is more like having a detailed map and knowing exactly where you want to go.
Yeah.
You're giving the algorithm some examples that are already labeled, and you're basically saying, learn from these, and then try to predict what's going to happen with new data.
So it's kind of like showing the algorithm a bunch of pictures and saying, these are cats and these are dogs, and then seeing if it can tell you what a new picture is.
Exactly. You're giving the algorithm all the right answers while it's learning. And then you see how well it does when you give it new data that isn't labeled.
I see how this could be really helpful for education. Can you give me a specific example?
Sure. Let's say we want to figure out which students would do well in a flipped classroom or a project-based learning setting.
Okay.
We could use supervised learning to look at data from students who have already done well in those settings and try to find common characteristics or patterns. Then the algorithm could use those patterns to predict which new students might be a good fit.
It sounds like a really powerful way to personalize education and make sure every student gets the kind of learning that's best for them.
Right.
But I imagine that kind of learning needs a lot of data that's already labeled to be accurate.
You're right about that. That's one of the downsides to supervised learning.
Right.
It can be hard to get that much labeled data. And it could be even harder when you're dealing with something like education, where you have to be careful about student privacy.
That makes sense. Earlier, we talked about GoFAI or good old-fashioned AI, which seemed a little less advanced than machine learning. Can that still be useful in education?
It can. GoFAI might not be as popular as machine learning these days,
Right.
but it can be really helpful for certain tasks, especially when we want to understand exactly why a decision was made.
So can you give me some examples of how GoFAI could be used in a classroom?
Sure. Think about systems that can give students personal feedback on their work. A GoFAI system could look at a student's essay and give them specific suggestions based on rules about grammar, structure, and content.
So it's like an automated writing tutor that can point out exactly what they need to improve.
Exactly. GoFAI can also be used to help teachers make decisions.
Okay.
Imagine a system that watches how students are behaving and how well they're doing, and then gives the teacher suggestions on what to do.
That would be super helpful, especially for new teachers who might not have the experience to spot those patterns themselves.
It's all about using AI to make us better at what we do,
Right.
not replace us entirely. GoFAI can be a really helpful tool for giving teachers and students support and guidance in real time.
All these different AI techniques seem so promising, but it sounds like there isn't one perfect approach that works for everything.
You're right. You need to pick the right AI tool for the job.
Yeah.
It's not about using the most complicated technique, but about understanding the good and bad parts of each one,
Right.
and then choosing the one that fits your specific problem and the data you have.
So it's kind of like having a toolbox full of different tools.
Exactly.
And you need to know which tool to use for which job.
Exactly. And as we learn more about these tools, we can even start to use them together to create even better solutions.
I like that idea. It's about taking the best parts of each approach and combining them to create something really unique and effective. We've talked so much about how AI can be helpful, but I know there are also ethical things we need to consider. Does the book talk about that?
Yeah, it's really important to think about the ethical implications of using AI in education. The book talks about the Institute of Ethical AI in Education, or IEAAE, and their framework for using AI ethically.
That sounds important. Can you tell me more about that framework? What are the main things it focuses on?
One of the biggest things the IEAAI framework talks about is having really clear educational goals.
Okay.
We shouldn't use AI just because it's cool. We need to have a good reason and make sure the technology matches up with our values in education and that it's actually going to benefit students and educators.
That makes sense. What else does the framework highlight?
Another really important thing is making sure our assessments are fair and don't discriminate against anyone.
Right.
We need to be really careful that AI-powered assessments are fair and that they don't put any group of students at a disadvantage.
I can see how that could be a problem.
Yeah.
Especially since algorithms can sometimes make existing biases even worse if they're not designed and used carefully.
Yeah.
We have to make sure that AI is helping to create more fairness and inclusion,
Right.
not making things worse.
The framework also says that it's super important to be able to understand how AI systems are making their decisions, especially when those decisions affect students' lives.
That reminds me of what we were talking about with GoFAI.
Right?
One of the good things about GoFAI is that it's transparent. It's easier to see how it's using its rules to get to a certain result.
You're right. With more complicated machine learning systems, it can be a lot harder to understand how they make decisions.
Yeah.
But we still need to try. We need to be able to explain to students, parents, and other educators how these systems work and why they're making the choices they make.
It's so important to have trust and understanding, especially when we're talking about using AI in something as important as education. What other ethical things does the framework address?
Well, another big one is data privacy and security. That's really important when we're dealing with sensitive information about students. We need to be incredibly careful about how we collect, store,
Right.
and use data. We have to make sure students' privacy is protected every step of the way.
That's absolutely crucial. It sounds like there's a lot to think about when it comes to using AI responsibly and ethically in education.
You're right. It's not just about the technology itself.
Yeah.
It's about making sure we're using it in a way that reflects our values and is truly best for our students.
This has been a really thought-provoking look at the ethical side of using AI in education.
Yeah.
I'm interested to learn more about how we can actually put all this knowledge to use.
In the last part of our deep dive, we'll talk about some practical strategies for figuring out all the different educational AI products and services out there and how to get started using AI in your own work as an educator.
I'm ready to dive into those practical applications. See you in part 3. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been exploring AI in education with Rose Luckin's book, AI for School Teachers.
We've learned so much
Yeah.
from what AI even is to how we can use it in the classroom and of course the ethical stuff too.
Now for the big question, how do we actually go from just knowing about AI to using it to make a real difference for educators?
Well, Luckin has this 7 steps to AI readiness framework. And step 7 is all about iterating,
Okay.
which basically means looking back at what we've done and making it better based on what we've learned.
So it's like a cycle of constantly improving things. We find a problem, we look for AI solutions, we try them out carefully, and then we see what worked and what didn't and make changes.
Exactly. It's not a one-time thing. AI is always changing.
Right.
So we have to be curious, stay involved, and be ready to adapt.
And a big part of that is figuring out all those educational AI products and services that are out there. It feels like there's a new one every day. How do we even start to figure out which ones are good?
Well, that's where all this learning about AI comes in. When we understand the basics and the ethical stuff,
Yeah.
we can ask the right questions and make good choices about which tools match our needs and our values.
So let's talk about some of those tools. The book puts them into a few different groups.
Right.
One is AI adaptive tutoring software.
Yeah, those programs give personalized instruction to each student based on what they need. A good example is InSkills,
Oh.
which uses AI to make custom language lessons for each learner.
So it's like every student has their own personal tutor. That's pretty amazing.
And it's not just about giving them information. InSkills actually uses natural language processing to understand what students are saying and then changes how it teaches based on that.
Wow, so it actually interacts with the student and responds to how they're learning.
Exactly. Another category is AI adaptive platforms, which offer a wider range of support
Okay.
and usually cover a bunch of different subjects.
Sentry Tech is a good example of that, right?
Yeah, Sentry Tech creates personalized learning paths, tracks how students are doing, and gives them specific feedback and recommendations, all using AI.
What's interesting about Sentry Tech is that they've actually built learning science and neuroscience into their platform.
Exactly. It's not just about the algorithms.
Right.
It's about using AI to support how our brains actually learn best.
And then there are AI assessment tools.
Right.
Those can look at student work, see what they're good at and what they need help with, and even give them personalized feedback.
And that can really save teachers a lot of time
Yeah.
so they can focus on other important parts of teaching.
And some of those assessment tools can do more than just grading. They can actually give insights into things like how students learn best and how they solve problems.
It's about understanding the process of learning,
Right.
not just the outcome.
And finally, we have AI recommender systems. Those can suggest resources, learning paths, or even connect students with other learners based on their needs and interests.
Adaptemy is a good example of that. It uses AI to create personalized learning paths that consider the student's skill level,
Okay.
how motivated they are, and what their goals are.
It's like they have this intelligent guide helping them through all the different educational resources that are out there.
As you can see, there are a lot of possibilities, and new tools are popping up all the time. The important thing is to be thoughtful about which ones we choose.
Yeah.
We have to use what we've learned about AI and our commitment to ethical practices to guide our decisions.
This deep dive has given us all the information we need to do that. We've learned how to identify challenges,
Yeah.
explore possible AI solutions, and really think critically about the tools that are out there.
Now it's up to you to take that next step. Think about the problems you're facing in your own work as an educator. How could AI help you solve those problems in a way that's good for both you and your students?
That's a great question for all of us to think about. Rose Luckin's book, AI for School Teachers, is a fantastic place to start. Don't forget to check out the show notes
Yeah.
for links to the IEIAE framework and other helpful resources.
The future of education is being shaped by AI.
Yeah, it really is.
And if we use this technology thoughtfully and ethically,
Right.
we can make learning more personal, more engaging, and more effective for everyone.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into AI in education. We hope you feel inspired and ready to explore what AI can do in your own work.
Keep learning, keep exploring, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in education.